The lesson title was Oasis of Truth. First, let's talk about truth itself, and then we'll talk about the oasis. There are many dimensions of truth, right? Even with a capital T. You can have truth for an individual. Every time I play tennis, I hurt myself. What do we know about it is done unto you as you believe? What do we know about that? Argue for your limitations, and guess what? They're yours. And we do it all the time. I catch myself. Like, where did that limitation come from? So limited belief gets you a limited amount of truth based on what you see in form demonstrated in your life. All right, let's go to the opposite extreme, which again, there's many dimensions. The universal truth, the highest truth. What do we know about that? Unlimited potential, unlimited abundance, infinite possibilities. The highest truth knows no lack or limitation. So I'm going to use a leadership example to continue to illustrate the multiple dimensions of truth. And I've used this many times. I've been an administrator for about 20 years or so. And I always like to say, you know, when you're 30,000 feet in the air, what's the view like? Endless. Expansive, endless, broad. You're seeing the mountains and the forest. But I'm going to go off script. I'm going to go to the exact opposite. And what does it look like when you're on the ground? Yes, in other words, we have this saying that says you can't see the forest through the trees. But you're seeing the tree bark, the tree leaves. You might be seeing the landmines, the quicksand, and the tripwires that at 30,000 feet in the air, you can't see. And I say this because I've watched some leaders come into organizations, hardly get to know the organization, and just start marching from 30,000 feet in the air where it should go. And for me as a middle manager, it's like, if we don't pay attention to what's happening down on the ground in the troops, trip over that wire, fall into that quicksand. Does it require all of those dimensions? And the 5,000 feet in the air as a middle manager, what's the view? You can see the tree tops. You can see the edges of the river. You can see the terrain. You communicate with those on the troop, and you pass the information up and down. So this is important to leverage this sort of perspective when we're talking about truth and when things in our life just quite aren't going like we want them to. For your greatest good, these levels must work together. So, something comes up in your life, relationship-wise, somebody leaves, financially, something impactful happens, health, accident, you name it. You're at ground zero. Life can get, no matter what the issue is, very complex, confusing, muddy. Walking through the desert, getting very thirsty for an oasis. An oasis, a fertile spot in a desert where water is found. How do you find your oasis? Return to the 30,000-foot view. The 30,000-foot view I'm talking about is universal truth, which means letting go of the form at 0 feet. All of us get stuck down an alley And no matter what the issue is, again, relationship, financial, job, creativity, whatever it may be, it's hard for us to try to back out of that alley at 0 feet because you can't see the terrain. You're stuck in a maze. However, we can, and this is spiritual principle, that we go back and focus on the highest truth to get out of that alley. And we let go, and we approach the issue differently from a different dimension. And I continue to quote Einstein, who says, you cannot solve the problem at the same level that you created it. How many facets of a diamond? And believe me, I know when you're in turmoil, life as an issue, that doesn't seem like a diamond. I get that. But yet, I'm looking for multiple facets. And so as a practitioner, all ministers in religious science are practitioners, I have the privilege to hear people's issues. And yes, I call it a privilege because it requires trust and for people to share their vulnerability. And typically there's a story that goes around whatever the issue is, right? You relate to that? I mean, we usually don't just lay out the facts in a couple bullet points, right? And sometimes we wrap ourselves around that story so tightly that it becomes our identity. But it's not who we are. We tend to get in our way. We try to control people and circumstances. We see it one way and one way only, and that's the right way. We tend to create our story, why things are complicated, why we're limited, why we don't have certain things. But it's not complicated to God. It's not complicated 30,000 feet in the air if we're willing to let go of that story. If we're willing to let go of seeing it the way we're seeing it, feeling it the way we're feeling it, which means a change in mind. We need to get our focus back into the higher dimension, that universal truth. So what's the spiritual tool we use here to return back to focusing on the universal truth? Treatment, or affirmative prayer, for those of you who may not know. Affirmative prayer. We teach spiritual mind treatment, and the simplified version is 5 steps, but I'm going to talk about the first 2 just briefly. What's the first step? God is. And if you don't like the word God, that's fine. Choose whatever word works for you for the highest good that you can imagine. Describe, characterize, and create a story around that. In other words, in spiritual mind treatment, you can stay in step 1 for a long time. God is what to you? A loving spirit, an intelligence, infinite intelligence, a divine source of life. And when I started studying science of mind, I literally created sheets of adjectives with words of what I thought God was. And then I hung it on a bulletin board so that I would see it a lot. Because now I'm starting to let that story be what I focus on. Now, some people will say, well, you're sticking your head in the sand, ignoring what's happening over here. Well, that's happening at the 0-foot level, and we've gotten ourselves, by our beliefs, into a little corner or alley. Yes, I recognize we're in an alley. I recognize we're there, but that's not where we're going to spend our time, our focus, or our energy. What's the second step? Unification. Well, if God is that, and I am one with God, I am that. And how does that show up in my life? Maybe you don't have a relationship, but you have, you're financially well off or financially secure. Or, you know, maybe relationships having a problem, but you've got a job. Where are we focusing our blessings, our gratitude? The second step is really, I am that. And then when we think about I am that, how do we show up, or how do we be with that? Love, joy, peace, beauty, power. Not power like I'm going to run you over. Natural power. Claiming the power that you are. Now I have to say there's lots of demonstrations happening around here, but the difficulty is that it doesn't become widely public, because it means people having to share their personal, vulnerable issues. So without anyone needing to reveal their issues, how many people have used prayer or spiritual mind treatment and ever had a demonstration? I believe that's probably why you're here. There are many times that I've had people say right after the treatment, wow, that feels a lot better. That feels really good. Why would that be? You have lined yourself up with truth, and truth, you feel it when you line up with it. I can turn out all the lights in this room, and we can maybe do this at candle lighting service. One candle will overcome that darkness. One truth can overcome your darkness. That's potential. Truth brings on a new freedom on how a situation can be viewed. Because typically, it seems like for myself, I'll speak, a lot of times you might be in where you become defensive. And so you're creating that story to defend. But God doesn't need your defense. Do you need your defense? If you know your truth, like the candle in the darkness, the truth will shine. There's a freedom in not believing every thought you think you know. But it first means becoming aware of that thought and then saying, do I believe what I just told myself? Now, there are also times where I've done treatment for people, and as soon as they're done with the treatment, they go right back to their story. Again, because they're identified with the story. And I'm going to say that sometimes we don't even realize how, one, uncomfortable we are not having drama in our life. If you've had drama your whole life as a kid, everything that happens to you is going to become drama. Not everything. And, okay, I'm not going to go off script. Number two, we sometimes don't realize for ourselves that we're uncomfortable not having busyness in our lives, because that seems to make us important. What you doing? Nothing. Nothing. I'm just being peace. Three, we become uncomfortable not having the chatter going on in our mind. Oh, look at that. What about that? I went running with a bunch of folks yesterday and realized I was getting caught up in all that chatter. And it was like, do I really want this chatter? Because it was becoming political. And I'm typically an apolitical person, so I'll get to that in a minute. So many of us, this is a spiritual goal that I challenge all of us together. To be just as comfortable, if not more comfortable, being who you are, truly who you are, than being busy with the drama, the busyness, or the chatter going on. And that takes spiritual practice. Peace and calmness within radiates like a ripple out of your beingness. That's the good side of inside out. So, do we need to be radiating more peace and calmness right now in society? I thought you might think so. Doesn't matter what side you're on at the ground foot level. It's painful, is it not? So in the e-blast I sent out this week, and if you're not on the e-blast, please sign yourself up. You can do that from our website. I mentioned that on Election Day, November 8th, we will open the center during polling hours, 7 a.m. to 8 p.m., for anyone who wishes to come join us in meditation so that we may know the highest good for our country. Where will we be focused? 30,000 foot level in the universal truth. Now, my techie self, I told people in the e-blast to click on this link to something called a doodle poll. And there's nobody there but me. I panicked for a moment. And then I said, oh, well, maybe we need another way to sign up. So we'll put something on the, in the Loftus Hall on that. I don't have it there yet. Or you can go back to the e-blast and click on that link. But I'm hoping that more of you will join me in whatever time that you have, whether it's 30 minutes, an hour, or whatever, so that we do our spiritual practice, this important spiritual work, because someone has to do it. And that's us.
Someone has to be it.
Yes, be it. Correct. So, all right. I'm going to share a very personal story. It could potentially trigger you. This is a loving, healing environment. And I will ask just for a minute for all the practitioners and ministers to please stand. Please take a good look. If anything triggers you in my personal story, please go see a practitioner. Because a trigger means that there's something to heal. Okay? Understood? Okay, please sit. So, when I was 17 years old, I was a foreign exchange student. And I had a host family that I lived with them for the summer. And I'm going to get right down to the story where the host father made advances at me during the day, when we were driving, and once while I was sleeping. Now, thank God, when I said no, he respected that. But, obviously, I was still violated beyond a space that is appropriate and respectful. So, over time, I've told my family here, because we have a relationship with these people, meaning I have Swiss family over there that talk to these people. They've come over here. My family's created a great relationship with them, etc. But we were going to be traveling this summer with my daughter, my two nieces, young, beautiful women, and a cousin who's also a girl. So I told my family that I was going to speak the truth to my host father. kind of reaction would you expect? Some family members, specifically male, got angry that I was upsetting the relationship. Understood. But I'll also speak compassionately in that there is a lot of subconscious thought in that person getting angry, right? So at first I got defensive and said, I am looking for support in this. And I don't really get too angry, but we were yelling at each other, and that's not typical in my family, because we don't typically talk about feelings. So, of course, many of you want to know how that went. I did face the host father with his wife, who is very supportive. And he said he's had so many accidents, especially with his head, that he can't remember if that happened. And that if I say so, then it must have happened. So not really taking responsibility. Now, some women would also say, hold him to that. I can't control him. I can force a horse to water. Can I make the horse drink? I don't know at the soul level how much he's supposed to get in this lifetime. That is not my responsibility. But I spoke my truth. And it all turned out fine, meaning, you know, lots of discussion and lots of other things about relationship. And I know that he knows that he intentionally did that. Now, why am I sharing all of that with you? Do you think what's showing up on TV today is injuring people? Yes. And I had somebody challenge me saying, how can you see any good in that? And I'll say for those of you in the room, men or women, 50 years ago, you didn't talk about this stuff. And if we never talked about it, we'd never get to a place where we can recognize we need to heal. What road are we going to take? The high road. It doesn't make it right. Forgiveness is not about condoning. It's getting back to the truth and speaking to your power, which, of course, I've had men tell me I'm aggressive, and I say, well, that's actually women being assertive, and maybe you're not used to that. I mean, we're revealing a history here, are we not? And whether, again, man, woman, or child, we have the opportunity to know the truth. And in knowing the truth, to heal that truth. To heal, not the truth, to heal the untruth. That's the good that I see. That's why I'm calling you to join me for meditation on November 8th. Because no matter how it lands, I want the high road. That's what I want to stand for, and yes, that's what I want to be. So, I'm going to end with a spiritual mind treatment. Could I ask the ministers and practitioners, based on where you're at, to either come stand in the front of the room or the side of the room or the back of the room while I do this treatment? Because I'm asking these folks who have been trained in science of mind to stand in their consciousness while I do this spiritual mind treatment. As so we get comfortable and we breathe in the breath of life. The breath that is abundant, the breath that is present in every moment. I come into the knowing of my beingness, not just in my body, in my spirit, in my soul, in the essence of who I am. And as I speak my word for every individual here, for we are one. And I am knowing that in this moment, that we have the opportunity to heal by knowing our greater truth, by knowing that indeed there is a knowing of respect, of not love at the zero ground level, but love, universal love, love that is unconditional, the goodness of love that is an energy that circulates and heals by people knowing their truth. And I am knowing in this moment right here and now, in this room, all of those that may have been triggered, all of those injuries which may have been revealed, are now moving to its truth with the candle, showing the darkness, speaking the truth. The impress of thought goes into universal mind and becomes whole. The wholeness of who we are and who we've always been. This wholeness being the truth of God, the love of God, the Spirit of God, the love, the light, the peace, the beauty, the joy that is indeed every soul's birthright. And I am knowing that this birthright is being revealed, that at the ground level we are releasing all that is unlike that which is true. We are releasing the fear and the anger, and we are coming into the truth of knowing, of compassion, the compassion of the human experience with the truth of the spiritual truth. And so for everyone in this room, for this community, the Center for Spiritual Living, as well as the Chico community and all those beyond, I know that this truth continues to ripple. Ripple in the beingness of our minds, hearts, and soul lining up with our truth. Speaking that truth, knowing that truth, focusing on that truth. And in that power of truth, it continues to ripple out for the greatest and highest good of the United States of America. I give great thanks for this knowing, for this community, for having this truth be revealed. And I'm releasing it in mind, just letting it be so. And together we say, and so it is.